Good morning, everyone. I am Timothy Yee, a registered principal offering securities and advisory services through Independent Financial Group, LLC, IFG, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor. Member FINRA, SIPC, Green Retirement Incorporated, and IFG are unaffiliated entities. We're not talking about investments today, but as always, past performance is no guarantee of future results. So one of my favorite topics, folks, we're going to be talking about retirement and what does it actually look like. This whole idea actually got started, and again, here's the Green Retirement website. As I mentioned, our conversations are recorded, um, going all the way back to last year, or excuse me, 2 years ago. And our latest conversation from July, which was with CFA Ken Ryan of Parnassus, talking about why Parnassus does not want to be in the SpaceX IPO, Anthropic, and OpenAI. So if ever you want to re-listen to these, please do go there. Um, the If you would want to reach out through LinkedIn, again, I'll put this in the chat box. And there we are. The question of how much do I need to retire is a common one. It seems to be on every web search I do. Here's Money Magazine. Answer these four questions, and we'll tell you how much you need to retire. I've always found it sort of humorous that we can just grab a number without any facts and say this works. For example, saying $1 million is what you need. Well, the average home price in San Francisco is around 1.3 million. But if you have $1 million and you're living in Detroit, well, you might actually be doing quite well. I've seen homes there. Now, granted, they are fixer-uppers, but $15,000. So I think what Rose and I have been discussing is why don't we start at a more holistic level of when do you want to retire and what does retirement look like? Now, I do have a client who has retired to a condo on a golf course. He also confessed that he was getting tired of golf and has gone back to substitute teaching. But I am aware of clients who have retired on board a sailboat and a yacht. I have another client who's actually traveling all around the Western United States in an RV. And another friend and client who sold his home in San Francisco and moved to the south of France. So, folks, depending upon what it is you want to do and where, your number, which is so easily encapsulated by Money Magazine, is not actually that easy. At least that's my 2 cents on it. And so that's why we've entitled this, How Much Do I Need to Retire? Because the idea, and one that we've trademarked, is retire with dignity. The number that is right for you is the one that helps you retire with dignity, that lets you do what it is you want to do in retirement. To that end, it really begins with the life you want to lead. It's not an arbitrary number. It's not answer four questions. I will actually share in a bit a 7-page workbook that I use to go about trying to suss out what might retirement look like. And from there, then we start thinking about how much income do we need, which then tells us the number. But it all starts with what kind of retirement do you want? What is the income to support that? And the income puzzle that Rose has created is our way of trying to back into, well, if this is the income figure, how are we going to support it? What are the pieces of the puzzle that go in to support that? If there's a gap, how will we close that gap? Some of the things you may be looking at are working longer or saving more. I have had people say, well, there may be an inheritance from my parents. I'm not counting on it. So that might be part of the answer. But the time to talk about it is now. After 36 years in the industry, I can say for most of my clients, they start thinking about retirement generally by age 50. Now, I think about my mom in this example. When she turned 50, she was very definitive. She wanted to stop working at Kaiser Hospital's dietary department I think it's now called Nutrition Services, but she wanted to stop being a dietitian at age 62. She even wrote it on on her calendar. This is my retirement date. She chose her birthday when she was 62, and when we got to that year, she was counting down the days. And then you focus on what you can control. One of the hardest conversations I had was with an employee of Tower Records. Many years ago, I was the 401k advisor for Tower Records. Some of you may remember the Tower Records sign, yellow and red. No, I wasn't the reason the company went out of business. But she had told me that she wanted to retire in Oregon, possibly to grow grapes and sell them to a winery, just something like a small little farm doing grapes. And she had never invested in the market, and she had a reason why every year she had not invested, whether it was the economy was bad or there was a war going on. Every reason was well thought out, but she had also lost the ability to grow her money. And so, as I was trying to work through the calculations, I really didn't see how the numbers were going to work. So, we focus on what we can control, and for everything else, we have to let it go. So, these are the questions that we use to determine what kind of retirement do you want, as opposed to just an arbitrary number, which I hope I've shown you the number is not um, the way to go. It really depends on a lot of things. When do you want to retire? Are you going to fully retire or retire part time? Again, my client who is living out on a golf course in his condo found himself getting bored. So he went back to substitute teaching. He checked in with Social Security to see how much he could earn in a given year, and he made sure that his substitute hours were less than that. Are you traveling? Are you going to move somewhere? Are you staying put? What exactly will you be doing? Less than 17% of Americans, according to the surveys I've been reading, less than 17% of Americans actually move permanently at retirement as part of a transition. The majority, over 53% of Americans, uh, age in place is the expression, but basically they grow old in the home that they have at age 50. Now, I know for a fact that Rose and I will likely be moving. It gets quite hot here, and I wouldn't mind some cooler temperatures. What is it you want to do in retirement can be defined by work, but it also can be defined by your legacy. Do you want to help family out? Are you intending to leave an inheritance? I remember with one client that I was talking with, I told her quite candidly, Margot, given your age, your longevity, and what we've discussed, and the amount of money, I really don't see how you're going to be able to spend through all of this. Margot was quite a frugal person. Um, she said, "Oh, don't worry, Timothy. I have a list of nonprofits I'll be giving the money to." So, thinking about these things ahead of time and then setting it up accordingly is important. And ultimately, yes, if you're working, it's because you enjoy it. You want to work. That's really what I like to hear from my clients is I get to work. I want to work as opposed to I have to. So retire with dignity is really how we approach it, and it starts now. Now, this is a conversation you'll be revisiting on a yearly basis, but at the same time, as you get closer to retirement, the numbers will come into sharper focus. Any questions so far, folks? All right. So current spending. It's important to know how much you will be, how much you currently are spending, because those numbers are going to change in retirement. Some of you may be doing a budget, and there are any number of budget tools out there. But in case you're thinking about moving, let me just get the website here. Let's see. There we go. Here we are. Back over here. I'll pop this in the chat box. So this is a living wage calculator, And I'll go back to sharing my screen. Oops, there we go. Back over to, oops, a daisy. All right, folks, there we are. So I like this calculator because you can actually think about, hey, I'm currently living in this state, in this county. I'm thinking about moving here while working. And this has become a little more common post COVID with remote work. But what I like about this is you're able to see, at least for the county, at a theoretical level, how much does it cost to live there? So for us, I'll use California. Alameda County is where our office is based. And as I think about the two of us working with one child, again, James, who answers the phone, is now 33. But back then, using these numbers from February of this year, it estimates that for two working adults with one child, the living wage per hour is $33. So then you can think, is it possible to live there or do I need to do more? It also breaks out what it believes to be typical expenses. Now, we can quibble with these. Certainly, I think Rose and I would say, wait a minute, 22,000 on childcare slash education. We Oh, looks like Rose has a question, so I'll stop talking. And Rose, go ahead.
Oh, not a question, but a comment. I just want to share that we're developing a budget tool that is interactive and would be much easier to use, where you can, by putting in your numbers, you can easily see how much you can defer more towards your 401k or 403b, and you can use it, monthly or and adjust it and to make it really easy, make it accessible, and help our participants, like you here, help figure out, like, where can you get, from the current income that you have, where you can possibly get squeeze a little bit more to put into your retirement if you want to.
Well, thank you much, Rose. Uh, Again, yeah, we're trying to come up with tools that are easy to use, one-stop shop, branded with Green Retirement, so that you have just one place to go, greenretirement.com. One that I haven't been able to quite figure out how to come up with a nice, neat green retirement package, but is one that some of our clients have asked about, living abroad. And I'll pop this one. This is one of many websites that you can check out, but it gives you the cost of living by country. And so a client of ours who was living in the San Francisco Bay Area was thinking about possibly moving to Panama. He actually took several trips there. He speaks Spanish, so there was a natural synergy of being able to live there. But it wasn't until he got to Panama, and he has some eyesight issues, I'll say. I think he's legally blind, even though he can see. But what he did not realize, and what the numbers don't show, is that the sidewalks in the neighborhoods that he was looking at, the sidewalks were in pretty bad shape. And his concern would be if he went out for a walk, he might fall down. Now, if his wife goes with him, of course, she would make sure that she's sort of the eyes and avoids all the issues. But imagine the limitation that could happen. So, anytime you're thinking of moving or living somewhere in retirement or even during your working years, it's helpful to go check it out because something like that will not be reflected in the numbers. But against that backdrop, at least it gives you an idea of what might it cost to be living there. And then as we look at these expenses, which again, we can argue with them. I know for the high school that James went to, I believe it now costs, I think it's around $83,000 per year. So it's expensive, folks. No doubts about it. But at least it gives us a running start. So use a budget, figure out your expenses, and then in retirement, what you're going to notice is that you likely will have different expenses. For example, we have clients who've paid off a mortgage when they retire. Of course, they're not working, so they don't have payroll taxes. So good, we're decreasing the expenses, and yet at the same time, we might be increasing expenses. Healthcare, for example, is a common one that is much higher for older people than when we're young. Travel is a common thing that people like to do. Um, hey, you're retired, you have the money, you have the time, off you go. And taxes, of course, my dad's a good example. He was complaining the other day that in retirement, he's earning more money than when he was working, and so he's paying more in taxes. Now, that might be partly a commentary on the life of an academic professor, which he was, but anyway. And again, using my mom as an example, travel for her was very important when she first retired. For the first decade, 15 years, she was traveling with a group of elder folks called the Elder Hostel. I don't know if the group still exists, but they would go to different places and they would schedule trips and the entire day around an elderly lifestyle. So eating earlier, getting up earlier, going at a slower pace. But as my mom has gotten older, her travel budget has gone down. So recognize, folks, this is a fluid situation. So from your current spending, which again, the website gives you a quick idea what it might cost in your particular county, or your budget will tell you exactly what you're doing. We take away certain expenses, add in others, and this gives us the income need. This is how much we need per month. And so then we are looking at all of our sources of income, which is the next slide, and we're saying, can we meet these needs? I think it's a more intuitive way than just grabbing an arbitrary number. Again, Money Magazine, not to knock them. I think when you have a headline, how much do you need in retirement? People will click on the article or buy the magazine at the newsstand. But I think trying to be a little more scientific is a better approach. One of the things to consider on your income need is, of course, Social Security. And oh, come on, there we go. I just had my birthday, so I went to SSA.gov. And so please do that, folks. You can log in. And if you haven't logged in, please set up your login. But it will show you how much you might get in retirement. According to my numbers, at age 67, I would get $3,300 a month. Oh, that's not bad. But I also recall in the San Francisco Bay Area, an area called West Oakland that is near one of our subway stations. And the rent on a Victorian in that neighborhood was $5,000 a month. So it's pricey, folks. Again, Social Security, I think, will be around in some form or fashion. There are a lot of headlines about Social Security is running out of money, or we're going to have to cut benefits. But remember, folks, if you cut benefits to people who get Social Security, elderly people like to vote. So I dare say Congress will figure it out in the next 10 years, since Congress seems to be very much a fan of keeping their jobs. So, are we clear as to how we're getting to the income number? Taking our current spends, subtracting expenses, and that gives us our income number. There are websites out there that predict how much money today, expenses today might be worth or might cost in the future because inflation, what have you. So you might do a mathematical example around that. And it would not surprise me, folks, if ChatGPT can do this for you. Any case, let's take a look at the next part, the income puzzle. So once we have our income number, and let's say it's $8,000 a month, how are we going to fill that $8,000 income each month? In my case, 3,300 of it may come from Social Security. Fine. In my client who lives on the golf course, there's part-time income from substitute teaching. But what else is going to go into this? And I like doing the thinking now because, hey, I'd rather do it now than get to retirement and say, gosh, I might not have enough money or I need to keep working. So this is the income puzzle. And you know, I like it because it's numbers based. And again, you can fill in what your numbers are. The $8,000 simply was a guesstimate as to what my monthly income is. But in the case of my Social Security, I know 3,300 is what I'll be getting. I don't know Rose's Social Security. I haven't looked at it. I will say I'm not getting a pension though. And notice over here the calculator is changing. It's saying, wait a minute, we've only covered 91%. So you have a gap of $700. And I think the mind can intuitively say, all right, I need to focus on that. I need to fix that. Now, do I do that by working longer so that my 401k is higher? Some folks do have pensions. Please include that. Other sources of income, rental income, for example. I was talking with a fellow Burning Man enthusiast while I was in San Diego at a conference. His dad passed away, but part of what dad was relying on was a rental income. He had a small home in San Jose, California that was generating income. And so getting everything tidied up and knowing what we have and correspondingly what the gap might be, if there is a gap, then we can address it. But I like approaching it that way from a number and then how are we going to support that number? Just double check, make sure nothing in the chat. We're good there. So with the goal of how much we're going to have, the $8,000 plus Social Security and other income, we know the gap. And then the other way to try to fill the gap becomes, can we grow the balance? In other words, more aggressive investments. One of the reasons that all financial advisors say past performance is no guarantee of future results is because aggressive investments tend to have more risk than lower risk or than less aggressive investments. Aggressive investments, I typically think about stock mutual funds as a category. Stock mutual funds can earn quite well, but they can also crash. You can also see negative returns. Correspondingly, if you have a less aggressive investment, say a money market, most people would agree that a money market is less risky than a stock mutual fund. The returns, though, on a money market can be substantially less. And so, as we look at how to fill the gap, is it a combination of working longer, investing more aggressively, trying to save more, cutting expenses? What is the right formula? And that's the issue I think I have with Money Magazine. It's trying to come up with a cookie cutter number for everybody that may or may not be right. I prefer the more individualized approach. Eventually, the gap that we're solving for is really we're trying to figure out how are we going to close that. And some of the levers we have, well, um, how much have we saved? Can we work longer? Are the returns need to be higher? Can we talk with our employer about how much they are contributing? And here's a good point. If your employer is putting in a match, I was just having this conversation with a client in Maine. And when I looked at it, I noticed that one of the employees was not contributing enough to get the full match. The employer was willing to give them $1 for every dollar they put in, up to 4%. But this person was only contributing 2. So, to my way of thinking, hey, you're leaving money on the table. But that's an individual conversation that needs to happen. It could be the person's financial circumstances are such that they cannot contribute 4%. There was a time early on in our marriage where, well, somebody could have done a presentation like this and I didn't have any money to give. I was working part-time, going to school full-time, and my blushing bride had just arrived from the Philippines and didn't have work yet. And since she was in charge of the budget, she knew where every dollar was because we needed every dollar. So I don't know why the person isn't availing of the maximum, but in general, I encourage people to put away as much as they can and really maximize how much the employer is willing to give. I'm going to show you the retirement savings calculator. Again, this is from Green Retirement, Green 401k, and it's trying to predict how much could you have at retirement. I'm going to start with, let's just go with 23-year-old me. Back then, let's see, first job in the US, zero. I didn't have anything in retirement savings. I was starting fresh at this bank. I was contributing 10% per paycheck on my $25,000 salary, which I thought was quite large. That was $2,500 a month, or about 200 per pay. Sorry, 200 a month. So $2,500 per year, $200 a month. My employer's match was $83 based upon the numbers. And according to this, with a 6% return, I would have approximately $752,000. Not bad, almost 800,000. But remember, folks, prices in San Francisco, for example, average home price 1.3 million. So it's at least we're starting to look at this. And with any of these calculators, there are assumptions baked in. For example, salary raises of 3%. It doesn't really talk about longevity. If you retire at 67 and longevity in your family is such that people generally live to 95, that's one number. If longevity is more like people live to 88, that's a different number. Again, this is why we have individual conversations and why the calculators are good, but they're not the whole answer. Any questions so far, folks? Rose, anything to add?
I would say that for now, the calculator can just be used as again, a tool to play around with, and as your circumstances change, you can put in the numbers, and as the person who's working on these tools, I can also see that we can make the calculator be a little bit more um, adapted and have a few more choices. The challenge that I have in terms of developing these tools is that the easier it is, the more that people will use it. And so that means that the tool has to be a little bit simpler, and I think the intent here is not so much to capture the exact amount, but to give people a way of approaching saving for retirement in a non-threatening way, if I may say. We're looking at our participants that range in age from, those who have newly joined the workforce and those who are closer to retirement. And so these tools are really intended to be used and to be attractive to that age range. And and so we have to make it uh, a little bit less complicated as it could be. And also, we have to take into consideration that for the ones who are a little bit more advanced in their careers, who are maybe in the 50 plus years, where you're now looking at retirement because it is now more immediate. It can be that you want to retire earlier than even Social Security age, and for that, this is where conversations with Timothy would be most helpful, because then that is where you can be able to really look at your own retirement picture and dial it down much better than what these tools are. So we're providing these tools in order to make retirement planning be as approachable as possible. But just keep in mind that everyone's financial picture is different. Everyone's goal for retirement is different. And so your savings rate, et cetera, is going to be different from each other. But the goal is that we all think of it and we all know what it is that we can control, what it is that we cannot. And so we identify what our agency is and what we can do in order to make sure that we support ourselves in our goals as much as possible for retirement.
A good point, Rose. It definitely helps to have it be less complicated in terms of the calculator. I'll just show you one of the more, well, I'll call it a medium level of complication, followed by one that's quite complex. And even when you are working with a medium complicated calculator or even a complex one, it doesn't necessarily mean the numbers are any better. So do keep that in mind. See what I can do here. All right, here we are, share screen. So this is a slide rule based a calculator. Again, you can look at how much you're contributing. I'll just go with the 10% here. Oh, looks like something has just gone squirrely. Excuse me 1 second, my computer is not being nice. There we are. Share screen. All right. So the 10% that I was contributing and my salary at $25,000, and the fact that Social Security now is at $3,300. The thing that I like about this calculator is that you are able to change your assumptions. Salary increases are here. What are you predicting inflation at? Have you saved any outside money? Your company match can be modeled here. Rates of return. Your current age, I could move that back down to 23, for example. There we go. The company that I worked at when I started was matching 100% on the first 4%. And my rate of return was 10%. There we have it. So again, you can see how by fiddling the numbers, I can come up with rather large retirement numbers. But this is the part that I focus on. Where the blue lines start, that is where you are retired. And the blue lines mean you're not running out of money. Concerning would be if you are running out of money and these numbers become red. So that would not be a fun thing. And yeah, Rose, I think I put oh, let's see, I did put the income calculator in, so there we are. Anywho, the final one that I'll show you, again, this is a bit more complicated. This one is a 7-page document. We're going to come up with our own version. But basically what it is trying to capture how much might you have. What are your expectations for retirement? What are your concerns? Each one of these has a price tag. A lot of my clients are focused on living too long, Alzheimer's, nursing home, some version of dementia. Social Security, both for you or a partner. Any other sources of retirement income? What investments do you have? Are you willing to work longer? Do you have any goals in retirement? For example, a boat purchase. These are the kind of things we get into. And then finally, we look at insurance, any cash that you might have, how much risk are you willing to take, and then we crunch it on through, and we have a calculator that pops out the result. My view, though, it's easier to go with the simple version and just, yeah, give it a try. At least we're starting the conversation now. Right. Let's back to here. Go. Oops, a daisy. So again, these are the components that go into a retirement savings calculator. And they are, even though they're just, six little boxes on a screen, these really are tough conversations to have. When do you want to retire? How much can you save? Are you willing to accept more risk for possibly higher returns? Again, conversations I'm happy to have with you. The final part that I'll mention, I go back to my example with Tower Records. The employee that I was meeting with who was hoping to plan for retirement, she really did want to grow grapes in Oregon and just have her small little plot of land. She was focused on external events that were very concerning, but at the same time, they were things she could not control. Inflation, the wars, the stock market. In a more realistic now example, we've added in tariffs, the elections coming up in November, interest rates, are we raising them, are we lowering them? What is the impact of the administration on what should be an independent body, the Federal Reserve? What you can control is how much you save, contributing more to your 401k. If you get a salary increase, I'm a big fan of saying, go ahead and put money into the salary, into your 401k, and also spend some. You got a salary increase because you earned it. So reward yourself. Make sure your portfolio is diversified. That's an important one. When you retire, where you retire, we've talked about that. We've even briefly looked at living international. And spending levels. Remember, with my mom's example, your spending levels will vary. Typically, spending levels for retirees are higher at the beginning. In certain categories, travel then starts to whittle down, but healthcare costs may go up. My mom has been looking at hearing aids. That was not something she needed when she first retired. So that really is putting it all together. Go ahead, Rose.
Well, it is really useful to know what you can control and what you cannot control. But if Timothy, if you cannot, thank you for going back to that. So I know that we cannot control what uh, happens in terms of elections, right? But there is a way that we can, in some way, have agency here because, for example, Senator Bernie Sanders has a bill in the Senate that is going to increase Social Security benefits by as much as $2,400 a year for retirees, which has impact on your retirement savings. And so, even though it's not directly under your control, it is possible to elect senators in whichever state you're in that would support this bill by Senator Sanders. And in terms of wars, yes, it is again, uh, an event that is not under our control. But the agency that we have here is to look at which government official might be in your congressional district or in your state who you see is working towards more diplomacy rather than wars, because wars definitely have an impact on our government budget, and that has an impact then on not only that, but it has an impact on the resources that are available to us and can cause us, as we have already experienced, the Iran war has already caused inflation and possibly even more impacts on how we get to spend our money, and which then impacts how much we can save for retirement. So yes, these areas might not be under our direct control, but we do have a measure of agency. And so I think that that is something that we might want to consider as well. So not directly under our control, but in some ways we can contribute to it. But the thing that we do need to focus the most on, of course, are the ones that we can directly control right now, because that one has really, especially if you're already closer to retirement, would have more impact on your financial picture after retirement.
I appreciate that. Any questions, folks? Love to hear from you and what your thoughts are. Again, this sort of just lays it out, everything that we've gone through. What kind of retirement do you want to have? What does that actually mean in terms of how much you might need per month? And then how are we going to fund that? The puzzle. Is there a gap that is revealed? And then what actions can we take to try to close the gap? Questions, folks. Love to hear from you. Anything and everything on retirement. Rose, anything to add? I don't want to. Oh, you're
Well,
very welcome, Beth. I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah.
we are going to be developing more tools, like I mentioned, the budget. And so we will have on our website a Green 401k tools and resources library. That
Mhm.
way, you can go to the website and just check it out. And even we're open to suggestions as I develop these tools. This is These are all interactive tools, and it's not set in stone. We welcome feedback. So as you play around with them, let me know what you wish you would see more of, and maybe we can refine it where we have the simple retirement savings tool, for example, and then one that is more detailed, like the one that Timothy showed, for those who would want to go into that in more detail. So all of your suggestions would be welcome, and any ideas that you have would also be welcome. My email is rose@greenretirement.com, but you can always just send it to Timothy and he will share it with me. So thank you so much.
I'll just pop that into the chat. There we go. Oop, there we go. Yeah, Katie, I appreciate that. Yeah. Always happy to chat with you, fiddle around with the tools. If there are ones that you're looking at, let me know. And thank you, everybody. Take care.